Okay, amazing. I think we can get started. The other speaker will be joining very shortly. So I'll be kind of sharing a bit first. So welcome to Climate Talks pre-COP30 virtual training. We'll be talking about attending the UN climate change conferences as a young person today, as I'm sure you're aware of. Super excited to have you all here today, whether you're preparing to attend COP30 in Brazil this November, or you're going to be following along virtually, or just curious about how these conferences actually work. Today's session really is just designed to give more context about the tools and inspiration to engage more confidently in the global climate process. Before we do get started, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm facilitating today's event from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people, who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. So I really encourage everyone around the world, no matter where you are, to take a moment to recognize the Indigenous lands that you're joining from as well. If we can go to the next slide. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll start with a short introduction to Climate Talk and who we are, followed by a presentation on what COPs are, how the UNFCCC system works, and what happens between each COP. And then we'll hear from our amazing panelists, Dean, Nicole, and Lucas, who will share their own experience as past and upcoming youth delegates at the UN COPs. We'll wrap up with a Q&A and closing reflections. And so just a few quick housekeeping notes before we dive in to the next slide. All participants are muted during the presentation. Please be sure to stay muted to create an accessible learning environment for everyone. If you have questions, definitely we'd love to hear them. Please feel free to drop them into the Zoom chat. If at any point questions come up, just send them our way, and there's going to be a time for Q&A after where we'll address them at the end as well. And finally, as always, please be kind and respectful towards our speakers and to each other. Next slide, please. So for anyone new to us, oh, we've already done the Zoom poll. For anyone new to us, Climate Talk is a youth-led nonprofit that demystifies climate policy and empowers young people to take meaningful climate action. You can see here some statistics that really resonate with what we do. Young people make up the largest generation of youth in history at 1.8 billion folks. 98% feel very worried about climate change, but a large majority also don't know or know very little about their country's climate policy. So there definitely is that gap that we're trying to fill. If we can go to the next slide. So again, we demystify climate policy and empower young people in the fight for climate action. We have very plain language resources that are hopefully accessible and digestible and actionable for the young people who access them as well. Next slide. We have over 100 volunteers in across 30 countries, and this spans 6 continents, so very widespread reach. And we're basically just very passionate about making climate governance and policy more understandable. Through our climate publication, we've produced over 500 scientifically reviewed articles on topics from adaptation to climate finance. We've reached readers in more than 180 countries. If we keep on going, you can see that we've also published a youth climate lawsuits database that kind of tracks like climate litigation cases led by young people. And we also have the university climate courses map showcasing climate-related academic courses available at different post-secondary institutions across the globe, and hundreds of other COP-related resources as well. So if you're interested in contributing to any of our work here or just staying updated on what we're putting out, be sure to check out our website. But basically, we really just want to help young people decode climate policy and show that young people can also shape the climate agenda. So definitely follow us along for updates. Um, Very quick introduction to COPs in the UNFCCC. Going to speed through this a bit so that we have more time to hear from our panelists. But just like past COPs, we'll be doing a daily coverage, briefs and summaries, updates of COP30 in Brazil as well. So that's the last thing I'll say about what Climate Talk will be doing. Basically, or exactly what is COP? COP stands for the Conference of Parties, referring to the 198 signatories of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, otherwise known as the UNFCCC. And this was established back in 1992. And the very first COP was held in Berlin in 1995. And since then, we've had basically one per year. If we go to the next slide, we can see that each COP is hosted by a different region, rotating between Asia, Africa, Latin America, Central and Eastern Europe, and Western Europe, including others. Each region can host the COP, although nations must pursue host candidacy individually. So the COP hosts high-ranking representatives of each government in formal negotiations. There's two main tracks of activity happening there. There's the formal negotiations between governments, and then there's a ton of other side events as well. So there's panels, workshops, discussions, pavilions organized by NGOs and youth groups and other organizations as well. We can go to the next slide. So the COP is essentially the highest decision-making body and enables countries to assess progress, negotiate agreements, and set climate targets. During the Paris Agreement, which was COP21, parties aimed to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius. I'm sure you've heard. And following the Paris Agreement, a lot of the COPs focused on ratifying the agreed upon mechanisms. So they may not have had as conclusive outcomes as this previous landmark. We can go to the next slide. The work obviously doesn't stop once the COP ends. There's also a work in between. We have the subsidiary bodies. If you attended our event a couple months ago on Bonn Learnings, but we have the SBSTA and SBI, and these meet mid-year in Bonn, Germany. And so these meetings are where a lot of the technical negotiations take place, where countries will review progress, prepare some draft texts, and identify issues that can be finalized at the next COP as well. We can go to the next slide. And so the ultimate goal of these is to formally adopt new decisions or commitments. Some years have been very historic, like the Paris Agreement, obviously, and then there have also been years where COPs have been quieter but still essential. So success at COP really depends on the political climate at the moment, as well as who the host country is, and a whole slew of other factors. The host country, I would say that definitely plays a big role in shaping the agenda and driving momentum. For example, in COP21, the French presidency did extensive like pre-negotiation diplomacy to ensure that an agreement could be reached. And like in contrast, I guess in COP15, it was supposed to develop or to deliver a major new global deal as well to succeed the Kyoto Protocol. But a lot of folks would say that negotiations kind of broke down there. There was quite a bit of tension between countries on who should bear the burden of emissions reductions and how much like financing wealthier nations should provide. And so the outcome of that was the Copenhagen Accord, and it was not formally adopted by all parties, and this makes it politically weaker and I guess more difficult to take accountability on. Looking ahead to COP30 in Belém, in Brazil, this will definitely be very significant. It's not only the first COP hosted in the Amazon region, but it also marks a very critical moment for countries to present their next round of climate targets, their NDCs. And so Brazil has kind of outlined a six-axis agenda, action agenda, focusing on six different themes. There's energy, industry, and transport. There's the stewarding of forests, oceans, and biodiversity, transforming agriculture and food systems, building resilience in cities and infrastructure and water, fostering human and social development, and accelerating climate action through finance, technology, and capacity building. And so this COP will hopefully carry strong themes of justice, of indigenous leadership, and global South solidarity. And that's why events like this and so many others are so important. And so we're really thrilled to help prepare young people be a part of that dialogue, hopefully. Okay. Next slide. The most exciting part of this event, our panel. Before we get there, let's meet our panelists first. I'm so lucky to have the opportunity to be in the same room and speak alongside some of the amazing young people who have engaged with COP in various ways. And so, given the themes of the upcoming conference, as well as priorities that have really resonated with youth, this panel is hopefully prepared to bring some insights into how folks are bringing communities to the world stage and bridging those two spaces. So I'm going to pass the floor to each of them to speak for a couple minutes on their background, the work that is bringing them to COP, learnings they've gained or hope to gain. We'll start with Jing and then Nicole and then Lucas. So I'll pass it off to you, Jing.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Annabelle. Can everyone hear me okay? Is everything good? Okay, amazing. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening to wherever you are in the world. My name is Dean Roman. I'm currently in my fourth year in political science and history at the University of British Columbia. And I was a virtual delegate for COP29 last year as a part of UBC's delegation to COP29. And basically, because of the 12-hour time difference between Vancouver and Baku, Azerbaijan, my day technically started at 9 p.m. in Vancouver and it ended at 9 a.m. in Vancouver. And basically, all night I was following the COP delegation, the COP negotiations, as well as the different meeting rooms, as well as the different press conferences. And it was a very, very formative experience for me. What brought me to COP was my passion for both youth advocacy and also youth leadership within the climate space. But also, I was really interested in understanding how the different negotiation processes work in the United Nations, and especially for COP, which is such a major event that oftentimes you can see it be criticized in the media for not achieving things or for not actually following through with a lot of the promises that are made. So, because of that, I really wanted to figure out exactly what goes on in COP. How does it look? And it was very, very interesting. And what I can say is, I think for the first week is where I really learned a lot about uh, kind of the setting the ground for how things work. And the second week is where I really got to witness the negotiations. I got to see all the Word docs that they had floating around with all the different agreements. It was really, really interesting. And I'd say that some of my main takeaways from this specific experience is the amount of planning and work that goes into figuring out a lot of the negotiations as well as a lot of the agreements. So oftentimes when I was in a call, sometimes it would last for roughly 5 hours, and they would sometimes dispute over certain framing, certain ways to explain different issues or to address different equity deserving groups. There was lots and lots of small things about wording, which I realized was actually a really, really important thing because it kind of defines who can and who can't be kind of bound to the different agreements that are made. And I do think that last COP was pretty historic in the sense that there was a lot of money promised to the nations that are categorized as developing. That's UN terminology. Um, I think it increased from 100 billion to 300 billion annually, which is a pretty significant increase, but it is also something that the developing nations, or mostly the global South nations, were not the happiest about because they did want more from the more developed countries, uh, quote unquote, more developed. And that was one thing, but it is still a start and a step in the right direction. And in addition to that, that COP last year was very relevant to this COP this year, in the sense that COP30 this year is the year that the nationally determined contributions are going to be officially finalized. So last year was kind of setting the stage for this, and everyone was kind of talking about COP30 and all the things that were going to happen at COP30. But that itself was also one of the um, main criticisms that people had, which is that people kept pushing the can down the road and kicking the can down the road. So that is going to be something interesting that we're going to watch play out this year. And in addition to that, as Annabelle was mentioning earlier on, the host country does have a very big impact. So, for example, because it was in Azerbaijan, which is known to be very invested in petrochemicals, in petroleum, in oil, there were 1,773 oil lobbyists at last COP, and that actually led to a lot of different interesting things with the media and very necessary coverage for the people that were resisting a lot of things that were happening. I'm sure we will dive into all of this throughout the rest of the panel. But oh, sorry. And in terms of my personal past experience, in second year, I was a UBC Sustainability Ambassador. In these two pictures here, you can see on the left, I was given a presentation about COP29 to a conference with roughly 450 students from the Lower Mainland within BC, talking about my experiences at COP and about youth leadership. And on the right, you can see a picture that was actually me and Annabelle. We had led an event for COP trivia, a climate trivia, and it was really, really fun. And we got to kind of spread the word more about COP and exactly what goes on, because I think sometimes information can be very siloed and very held up somewhere. So it was really nice to be able to distribute a lot of that. Currently, some things that I'm working on right now. Last year, I was the first ever president for the Second Harvest National Youth Council. So I worked on food waste initiatives and food security initiatives across Canada for last year from January to June. And a new cohort is actually going to be coming in to play this January. And currently, right now, I am doing some climate work on the side at UBC, but also I am currently working for the federal government as well, part-time. And I'm working in the Federal Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So I'm getting to also see the climate impacts of agriculture and food production within BC, Alberta, and just Western Canada in general. So yeah, lots of really interesting things. And I think COP has informed a lot of the different things that I'm doing right now. And it's also kind of encouraged me to explore UN processes a bit more. So thank you so much for passing the mic to me. I will pass it on to whoever's next. Thank you.
Yes, I think I am next. I'm so happy to be here. So I'm Nicole. I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So I'm accredited through Changemaker Exchange, which is a global organization that really helps support change makers and social entrepreneurs all across the world. And I'll be representing my own organization, Soulstalgia, which is an environmental initiative I co-founded in the third year of my business degree. I did like a dual concentration in entrepreneurship and MIS, Management Information Systems / Business Technology. So my top priority for COP30 is to really elevate the voices, experiences, and also solutions of communities that are most vulnerable, but also most often excluded from more mainstream climate discussions. So that often tends to be youth, frontline communities, and Indigenous peoples. A bit more about me is I'm a co-founder of Soulstalgia. So Soulstalgia is an environmental initiative that really amplifies youth and intergeneral voices around eco-emotions, eco-anxiety, and climate justice through creative arts. So dialogue and place-based events. We do nature walks, and really our nature walks, climate poetry events, and really our flagship initiative is this climate magazine that we started when I was in my third year of university, which I'll share further on. But besides that, I'm also the Changemaker Exchange 2025 Fellow for this year. And I also serve on the board of directors for Kabanka, which is this youth-led nonprofit, really empowering young Filipino Canadians through networking, skill development, and leadership so they can show up in more, I guess, professional spaces. So, for Nostalgia, again, my work began in November 2022 and just really started by leading a national consultation just across Canada with 180 plus youth. And one of the key studies or key findings that we found was that 81% of the youth actually identified eco-anxiety as a top priority to address. And this really just tied down to what we're just experiencing just in Canada and also just in BC. We also had a recent heat dome that came on, and it really just affected a lot of the community members. And of course, especially with my own cultural roots as well. Um, yeah, my family is based in the Philippines, which is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. And it also is one of the world's lowest emitters. It's ranking seventh in, I think, the Climate Change Performance Index for 2025. And it was kind of like I guess, the stimulus for why I created Solstal in the first place. It's because I really had those strong, um, yeah, foundations for why I really need to work on climate solutions. So in response to that study, and of course my own background there, we launched the Solstalgia magazine. That was our first ever initiative. It really features creative work from youth all across Canada. So they were highlighting their eco-emotions just through like poetry, thought pieces, dance, whatsoever, just art-based creative ways of this expression. And that was also featured by the Climate Mental Health Network, the Yale University Forum of Religion and Ecology, Canada's National Observer, and of course like other national platforms like the Starfish Canada Top 25 Under 25. So we've gained a lot of traction there, but this work is, of course, not just gaining that traction, but it's also just about providing that safe space for youth. And it's also just empowering them to be environmental leaders who really embody safe ways to express their eco-emotions through creative narratives. And it also just helps make those discussions much more personable, but also accessible. So by elevating more marginalized voices and spotlighting these eco-emotions, we're trying to really build a community around more, I guess, shared climate realities and solutions that we can all work on collectively. As for what I'm preparing for COP30, so I'm doing a bunch of research just in preparations for Brazil, and even just going to Brazil is definitely a little tough. I'm sure you've all seen like the high prices for housing and flights and everything going on. I think it was actually mentioned as one of the least ex inclusive COPs in recent years, so it's definitely something to prepare on for sure. But well, in terms of research, it's marking the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. It's set to be the implementation COP, really turning negotiated commitments into real world change to a 5-year action plan with like 30 key objectives across like 6 pillars of the action agenda. And I just recently saw that the president of COP30, what's his name, Andre Correa do Lago, really emphasized that implementation is rooted in cooperation and mutual support. So I think he really emphasized that there was a 98% reduction, in wildfires in the Pantanal, 80% in the Amazon. So it's really showing that reversing environmental degradation is definitely possible. But of course, the key negotiating issues that we're going to see here is that there's definitely a lot of debate on the global goal on adaptation, scaling up climate finance for developing countries, and really advancing a just transition. So one of the ways I've really been trying to prepare is, of course, doing all of that research, but also just collaborating with other youth who are going so we can kind of have, I guess, a shared document on all of the research that we're doing. So we don't just, I guess, duplicate all of that extra effort. And of course, I'm also doing a podcast as well, or interview series just on youth who, I guess, or youth and other individuals who are more marginalized in the space. So I can really just highlight their solutions and also their voices when it comes to climate discussions. I think it's really important to really emphasize those who are most affected and really just see what solutions they have and really try to highlight those. And of course, prepare on who I'm planning to meet at COP. So negotiators, experts, and climate leaders that I really want to talk to so we can strategize and really try to find ways we can expand beyond COP and also for years to come for future COPs as well. So that's kind of how I've been preparing. Of course, there's shared resources. There's the COP30 app as well. There's, of course, like Changemaker Exchange. They do a great way of just connecting youth with other youth leaders who are attending. And of course, there's a lot of platforms for you to really go out and learn more. I'd say going to a lot of these pre-COP30 events is definitely something to go to and really just talking to past COP30 delegates as well. So yeah, that is about me and how I'm preparing.
All right. I guess I'll go next. Can you guys hear me properly? Sorry. Had a bit of a cold. Okay, so sorry, the only thing I'm sh sharing here and then I asked Annabelle to project here was this artist call out that we're working on, but that's by no means the only thing that we're doing leading up to COP30. So yeah, I guess I'll start with introducing myself. My name's Lucas Troney. I'm a queer Latinx organizer. I'm a storyteller. I'm originally from the lands of the Mapuche peoples in what you call today Central Chile, but I'm currently based on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh people, Vancouver, BC, as we usually call it. Um, I'm co-director of Ritmos Climáticos, this org that we started really just with my friends coming out of college. They kind of just had that like startup energy, but with no financing because it wasn't a startup, it was our own organization. But yeah, our org, what we focus on is, and our slogan is mobilizing arts, culture, and digital media to advance climate justice, or as we call it, just simply mobilizing culture for climate justice. So what this means for us is fostering a lot of collaboration between Indigenous people, youth movements, and just creative communities in general, and bridging grassroots organizing with international advocacy and making those feel closer. Um, so yeah, this is going to be the first time I go to COP, actually, and the first time um, my fellow members and organizers within Ritmos are also going to COP, um, which is a little bit daunting, especially I think as a smaller organization, just as the one that we are. And this is definitely something I can share with Dean and Nicole about how just intimidating it all is to just go into this space without knowing really that many people or being that well connected. We have been lucky enough though with Ritmos that we've had these really good connections of people that have been to COPs in years before. Um, One of them was our good friend Bodhi, which is has become quite well known in the ocean climate space in particular. And he's helped us just kind of get a foot in the door in a lot of these spaces, which has been so helpful, but also just Annabelle, obviously, and Climate Talk and some of the cool work that you guys are doing. Um, yeah, so looking into COP, there is a few themes I think have already been discussed, obviously, by Dean and Nicole. But other ones that I did want to just emphasize again, this is definitely going to be the implementation COP. Um, and yeah, it's going to be a turning point in a lot of ways. For implementation, for adaptation, and for updating ambition, increasing ambition, and updating NDCs. So far, only I think 60 or 70 countries or so have submitted their updated NDCs for the 2025 to 2035 period. Um, and having those is just absolutely key. So if there's nothing else or if you're looking for like a low-hanging fruit or something else or something really simple to advocate for at COP, it's just that the countries submit their NDCs. Like if they haven't yet, make sure they do it, make sure it's ambitious, um, make sure it's as aligned with the 1.5 target as possible. Honestly, none of them really are aligned with the 1.5 target, but we want to get as closer and closer to that number because, as people have mentioned in the past, every zero point 0.1 degree counts, right? And every zero point 0.1 degree reduction makes a major difference. Um, yeah, so just updating those NDCs is super important. The other thing I wanted to talk about is TFFF, which is called the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I think I mentioned it in the chat just a second ago when Annabelle was introducing some of the major themes for COP, but it's this really interesting finance mechanism that they're introducing for this COP. And the way it's going to work is basically it's a blended financing fund to reward countries with tropical forests for their conservation. And they want to put about $4 billion or so a year into it, and they want it to be very co-led with Indigenous people. They're looking at like 20 or 30% of funds from these projects also going to Indigenous people, but Indigenous people obviously want to make that number more ambitious. And this is just going to be such a super important theme at the COP simply because of the fact that it is happening in the Amazon, in the gateway city of the Amazon, which is Belém. And the amount of Indigenous people that are going to show up to this COP, from what I've been hearing, is quite unparalleled, honestly, from any other COP in the past. And that does mean a lot of them, perhaps even most of them, will be from Brazil, but there will be Indigenous people from all over the world. And there's people that are going not even only for, ooh, sorry, sorry, my roommate had to I had to close my door. There's some that are going not only yeah, just for the fact of being in the conference, but also just for the objective of um, just creating pressure and showing how, like, showing the importance that Indigenous people are giving to this topic. So there's going to be a lot of momentum even outside of the COP, and they're talking about a lot of protests, a lot of side events. So expect there to be this like pretty like tangible, tactile, just tension in the air, I think, for more ambitious accords from Indigenous people, which is something I think honestly every COP should have, but it's something this COP is going to have in particular even more than others before. So that's something to prepare for, but that I find is really exciting. And also one thing I wanted to talk about was marine biodiversity. There's this new accord that's coming out about biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. They're calling it the BBNJ agreement. It was signed, if I'm not mistaken, about 2 years ago, 2023, but a lot of countries haven't ratified it or they haven't signed on to it yet. It basically is just talking about protecting the oceans beyond what is like the sea or the ocean border of a country, which is usually 200 kilometers beyond the shore. And there's basically no global accord that really is enforceable or that protects these shared areas in the world right now. So this is why they're working to come to a more ambitious accord for BBNJ, and that's not my area of expertise in particular. My friend Jose has worked in the ocean climate space for a lot more. If you guys want to follow him, Climate Jose, he's going to be working a lot more on the marine biodiversity and this, particularly this biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction agreement, because there's a lot of momentum for it in Latin America, especially because my home country Chile wants to organize the first um, session and the first apparently the first host. They want them to be the first host city for the BBNJ agreement. So that's really exciting. And yeah, as the same as it is for every year, finance is just like a super, super important issue. There's the Baku to Belém roadmap that came obviously from the last conference, COP29, to this one. People want to match something like 1.3 trillion in this climate funding for 2035. It's hard to say if that's actually going to be if that's actually going to happen or if it's just a number that we're throwing out there. We're not even close. But it's something we still have to remember because obviously the impacts of climate change don't stop being usually focused on those who are less privileged and those who emit the least, right? The principle of climate justice that we so much talk about. So yeah, I think that's where I'll stop for now because I've blubbered quite a bit. But yeah, I would love to answer some questions and be in dialogue with Nicole and Dean as well.
Amazing. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing those wonderful introductions about themselves, even in their introductions, just diving so deep into a lot of the context surrounding COP30 and the roads leading to it from COP29. So I think we can really just dive right into the questions that we have. We only have a short time remaining together. So again, if you have any questions you'd really like to see answered, definitely drop them into the chat and we will prioritize those. Otherwise, we also have a list of questions, frequently asked questions from past events that we've done in past years, as well as others. I see a raised hand. If it'd be possible to put the question into the chat, that would be amazing. I wanted to start off by asking all of the panelists, what is what is one piece of advice you'd like to give to young people looking to get involved in these like international climate negotiations or conferences, especially coming from very localized movements from organizations? What is something that folks would need to understand to participate meaningfully, whether it's like a logistical tip, just having a schedule before you go so that you're not overwhelmed with choice at all of the events and negotiations happening, whether it's like building relations ahead of time or just doing a lot of research to understand the context. Yeah, what is one thing that folks should understand to participate meaningfully? I don't know if anyone wants to speak first.
I think I feel comfortable speaking on that first. If and you can go after Dean unless you want to go first. If that's cool. Okay. I think one thing I noticed leading up to this COP, and to be honest, up until a few months ago, we didn't think our organization was going to go at all. Um, so I think f first I'll answer the recommendation more of people looking to go to COP just in general. But then I think yeah, what to focus on in the first COP as well is also a super important question. I think for those people trying to go for the first time, I think yeah, just never minimize like the impact of just sending emails to people. I think this is something we just did again and again with Ritmos, trying to get out to this conference. Um, just if you can find there's so many people's emails that are just publicly available online, but if you can find them, if you can talk to them, if you can give them a proper pitch about who it is that you are, what is you want to do at COP, and you can really sell yourself in this way. There's so many ways that they can help you, and maybe if they don't know how to help you directly, they can think of someone who can. So yeah, that's just my first piece of advice. Just try to reach out to as many people as you can.
Amazing, Dean.
Yeah, no, I think Lucas like really hit the nail on the head. I'd say in addition to that, like what Annabelle mentioned, having a schedule and knowing exactly what you want to follow and finding an issue or just a specific topic that really matters to you specifically. So for a lot of people, it's usually like lived experience. So for example, for me, I'd say that I focused a lot on the disaster relief fund because as someone who is Bangladeshi, and as you may know, Bangladesh is one of the most at-risk nations I just in general in the world for climate change and especially to sea level rise. Um, and because of that, I was looking a lot at the disaster relief fund. And I think if you find something that you're really passionate about and I think is like very central to you or to like what you're truly interested in, that'll make following it a lot easier because you're more likely to look at those updates to kind of follow along and see specifically what you want to carry back with you and like spread information about. But I think also like in addition to kind of breaking into the sphere of attending, I think definitely reaching out to different organizations, especially youth-led constituencies, are really, really helpful. Trying to find youth-led organizations within your area, but also let's say that you're coming from a country that is categorized as like Global South, for example. If you are coming from there, seeing what your government is doing or what different NGOs within your specific area are doing, and if they are sponsoring any youth to go, and also looking at the United Nations, UNFCCC, UNFCCC website as well, and seeing what kind of climate or youth in climate um, participation opportunities that they have. But I do fully understand it is very difficult to kind of break into the space. Like honestly, I'm not going this year. But last year when I broke in, it was through my university. So it can be hard to find those opportunities. But I think if you, just like what Lucas said, that if you look around and really try to send cold emails, it can be really helpful. And even if you don't attend in person, as long as you follow online and as long as you figure out what's going on, and you have something to show for the next time you want to go, for the next year, you can say that last year I followed COP like this, and here's everything that I did, and you can carry that with you, and can explain that when you're trying to apply to go the following year.
Amazing. Nicole?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, when it comes to really just breaking into the spaces and, of course, preparing for COP, I think one key thing that I found is really helpful is just talking to past people who've been to COP and talking to mentors who can really give you that key solid advice. Because most of the time, they're going to know like several avenues on how to get to COP and really just how to break into those spaces. Even just give you that warm referral so you can join Changemaker Exchange or like other United Nations Association of Canada, like internships, things like that. So you can really break into it. I think just really focusing on, of course, like cold outreach, but what's something that was really impactful for me was really warm referrals. I think people respond the most when they know someone close to them is really introducing them to another person, and it really just helps bring, I guess, that close relationship. So really just focusing on network, building that, and of course, your personal brand is super important nowadays. Of course, doing your research and really knowing what you want when it comes to COP. So really, something that is really helpful for me is identifying what success is when it go to a big conference, such as COP30. So what are the key success outcomes that I really want to pursue? What are, I guess, like the key KPIs that are really going to determine, okay, this is how I was successful here. So for example, me, I really want to at least interview 10 people who are going to have very unique solutions to the climate movement, but are also from more underrepresented communities, say, for example, Indigenous peoples, or people more focused on the global south, or specifically around the Pacific Ring of Fire, who are most affected by typhoons and other climate challenges. So just having those key goals, of course, networking and doing your research is so, so important. And I think just overall, when it comes to breaking into any space that's a little bit more challenging to break into, is something that I've really been focusing on is just having audacious courage. That's just in general, but if you see something and you really want to pursue it, don't be afraid to just apply and yeah, just reach out to someone that you really feel inspired by in LinkedIn. Just apply for it because you never know what might happen. Like 5 years ago, I did not think I was gonna go to COP30, and now I'm going. So, yeah, just go out there and go do it. It sounds so cliche, but it works.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing so many of those unique insights. I guess that's also a really good segue into once you actually get to COP, like what is the role of young people? A lot of, I think, like governments or like industry players who are also present at COP will silo young people into this role of either obviously like observing what's going on in a more like passive state, and then also being very active in that like activism, like rallying space. But how do you see the role of young people evolving, or in the past, how have young people been involved in COP conferences or other high level climate events? Yes,
Um,
Steve.
I think just the existence of certain constituencies like Youngo or different collaborative organi or all the different organizations working together is in and of itself a very powerful resource. And oftentimes I think I do fully agree with Annabelle that like youth often do get siloed into being like very activism or very observer. I think last year I was very observer because I couldn't talk at all. But I think one really powerful thing that youth have is the ability to network like crazy at COP. Whether it's online, virtually, they have a new networking platform when you're on the online platform and you can network through there. But also networking in person is a really, really strong way for different organizations to come together. I'm sure like Solastalgia and Ritmos Climáticos can go into this and explain like the power of networking with other youth-led organizations. And when you're able to do that, you can have kind of like global interactions happening and kind of these really interesting global collaboration on certain projects. So let's say that sure, you might not be able to fully have an exact say in like an NDC for a specific country, but let's say that you are working with like a group of people in a specific area. Let's say it's like West Africa, and you're like, we all want to talk about like the Green Belt initiative in like the Sahara Desert. And if you work with things like that and you're like, okay, how can we make our voices known? And you work with people that are like-minded with you, but are global connections, that can be really, really helpful. And it can not only help like organization, but also help you as a young person understand what it's like to both like collaboratively work internationally, but also kind of figure out like, oh, okay, how can we try to get change happening? Because there is a lot of power in numbers and especially collective action. That's an extremely powerful thing.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dean.
Do you mind if I add something to that really quick? I would say just in in general, the networking component, as Dean said, is so important. And it can really just completely change the way you experience the COP. Like your networking skills and how well you do, I think with that. It's often said that the people who get the most done at COPs are the people that have gone for the most time because they know the most people. Um, so this is something also I would also recommend if you can make sure to also network with people that you know have been going to the cops for a very long time. Um, and they sort of like have this experience and they can be sort of like a mentor to you in a certain sense. This doesn't mean that they're going to tell you everything that you need to do, but but often it can be just like a friendly relationship about someone that just tells you this is happening, this isn't happening. And also just on the networking component, I would say as well, there's so many group chats and stuff happening for COP30 internationally. People obviously like to use WhatsApp a lot. It's like the main global like messaging platform from what I know. I'm already in like I think like 10 or 20 different COP chats for now. And just that's just such a great way to not only reach out to people, but also just stay up to date with stuff that's happening. And I would also say, yeah, just following the um, the official just updates of certain like websites or newsletters. Like I really like one called Carbon Brief, for example, and they're doing this specific coverage of COP30 where they're sending people an email every morning about what's happening in the conference. I think it costs something like $5, but it's totally worth it because it's just quality journalism that'll just get you super up to date with everything that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I can follow up with this. And I think I'm definitely taking a lot of time to just consider this because I've definitely been to a lot of events where they just invite you just to have it as a marketing strategy, just to say like, oh, we invited you, but they ask you like, or you get to ask like two questions and that's it. And it's like something that they already strategized like 5 years ago. Like it's nothing new. I think for this one, it's definitely good to go in numbers, actually. So just collaborating with other youth and then going on to create the strategies or creating the side events or other initiatives that you want to do at COP. I think once you go in numbers, it's actually a lot more, I guess, less harder to ignore your own initiatives when it goes to big events such as this, where you can often be overlooked if you, I guess, just go by yourself. And of course, it's such a great way to not only collaborate, but also learn about the different strategies that other people are going to go into. Yeah, I think it's definitely something that needs to be worked on, but collaborating, of course, networking as what was previously mentioned, but also just going in numbers and really trying to really have those shared resources to collaborate and really try to see how you can best effectively deliver on the initiatives that you really want to pursue.
Amazing. Thank you so much. There's definitely some more questions in the chat, some regarding burnout. I would say burnout is always a big one, not even just for young people, but it seems very like unreasonable and in saying that people are so jet lagged and over caffeinated and sleep deprived and expected to make like very large decisions, whether for themselves or on behalf of government and that sort of thing. And so definitely prioritize staying hydrated, getting enough sleep. That's honestly really the only way, I guess, to mitigate that. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your questions. I'm afraid, due to time constraints, we won't be able to spend more time diving into them all. But if you did have any outstanding questions, definitely feel free to comment them on our LinkedIn or Instagram posts for this event, and we'll get back to you there as well for sure. I think there were a few closing slides as well. if we could have those up again. And I think there might be just one question for Ding in the chat, if I'm not mistaken, if you'll be participating virtually.
Oh, okay. Yes. So for that question, I was trying to type out a response, but I'm a very slow typer. Um, in terms of that question, I interpret it as like how is uh being a virtual delegate different from like what everyone is doing right now here. So for this year, I'm not attending like anything for COP. Like I'm not a virtual delegate and I'm not attending in person. But in terms of like the difference between virtual delegate and just like preparing virtually right now, and I'm gonna try to keep my answer as short as I can because it's 8:57. Um, Being a virtual delegate means that you have access to the entire COP platform, and you have like an actual badge and you're part of a delegation because you have access to the entire platform. You can sit in at every single meeting or every single press conference or every single thing, and it's basically like as if you were there in person, except you're just watching every single thing happening online. Um, so that is what it means by being like a virtual delegate versus like what you're doing right now is kind of preparing like this is the lead up to COP, which is you're researching for COP. So yeah, that's kind of the difference there. And certain areas have different virtual delegation badges. So specifically in the global north, they've reduced the amount of in-person attendees, but they've increased the amount of virtual attendees just so that the global north is not more present than the global south. So that's why my badge, which was supposed to be initially like an in-person badge, was converted to a virtual badge because I'm kind of from the global north. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And honestly, it's a lot easier often to track negotiations virtually. Even if you're there in person, there's going to be some negotiations that are closed to observers, or if they prioritize people with party badges, then a lot of youth observers will have to go into an overflow room and watch the negotiations on a TV anyways. And so it really is kind of a similar experience oftentimes. We have a Zoom poll for if you learned anything today. I know this was a bit of a shorter panel, but if you do have questions, again, we will get back to you on our LinkedIn or Instagram posts if you want to comment them there. I see some people sharing socials as well, so that's very much appreciated if you want to start acting on some of the recommendations of the panelists and like building those relations ahead of time. Thank you so much again for attending, everyone. I think we also have just another slide with our socials on it. Um, yeah, again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions. And I think that wraps up the event. So if everyone wanted to give a big thank you to our panelists, really appreciate you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for the
Thank
invite.
you. Thank you.